Music was the thing that I decided I was gonna show every doubter, every person who didn't accept me, didn't love me. I was gonna prove to the world that I could become something. I don't care what anyone says, like, divorce is not how it's meant to be. It's very common in our culture, but the two become one. Like, you might be born again, but if you don't understand that you have to take dominion over that flesh nature and reign through the Spirit. And I think that there was some of that knowledge there, but man, we were just getting exposed to Jesus. My name's Austin Camben, and I was a broken and addicted rebel, and now I am a son of God living in absolute freedom. Whenever I was a kid, we'll talk 5, 6, my parents, they didn't really have, a depth in their relationship with God at that time. My mom had grew up in church, but, they were just trying to discover life. They had a small family at this point. And so my dad has been vocal about his struggle with addiction. He came from adopted home. And so you have this young family that's just trying to adapt to life and also just kind of used to the world and the way that the world does things, the world's view of success and that kind of thing. So I remember being a kid and just feeling like a slight maybe emptiness, I guess, just this feeling that something was off, that maybe there wasn't this like depth of love that I wanted. My parents were very loving people, very accepting people. I always felt deeply loved by my parents, but there was always definitely something that was off. So I knew that from the time I was a kid. I was a kid that was very aware of my surroundings. So I would get into things and see things that I probably shouldn't have seen. My mom, my dad, they're just trying to figure life out. So kind of fast forward a little bit, being a kid that was very aware, my mom, I would say, did her best to stay kingdom focused. By the time I was about 8 or 9, we were getting invited by another family to church, to local church. And those were the best times of my life when my family was in church. I experienced God there. God became real to me, and I don't know what it was. It might have been my desperation because I was aware of some of the things that were going in my home. To detail some of those things, my dad struggled with a really bad addiction to crack cocaine, to cocaine and other drugs. And so I remember being 4 or 5 years old and listening, waiting up till 3 a.m., knowing my dad was out somewhere he shouldn't be. And I was just so aware. I would wait for his inevitable phone call for the night, calling home, and he would talk about things like suicide and how ashamed he was of his life, and that he would even say things like, I know my kids don't like me. And I was sitting there, I would sit on mute on the phone. I'd try to pick it up as soon as my mom would pick it up, and I would listen to their phone call. So I was just very aware of things that I shouldn't have been aware of. My dad didn't really bring addiction into the home, but the spirit of addiction was in our home. And the spirit of heaviness was in our home, what I now would consider to be the spirit of heaviness. Because I felt this weight of responsibility for some reason when I was young, that it was like my job, that I could do something to heal it, that I could do something to keep my family together. And I had to know what was going on. Going back to him getting introduced and our family getting introduced, God was planting seeds the whole time. God had an eye for our family. My dad having been adopted, like God had chosen us. And had loved us from the very beginning. He just knew it was going to take a lot of work. So we got invited to church as a family by the time I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, and we started going. And I started learning how to cry out to God. My dad, he was hearing God, and he was hearing about how, he secretly he would be alone and be like, man, if you're out there, like, what's the reality of this thing? Like, why are we here? And he was just asking those questions. And he would hear things like, only through my son Jesus. And so My mom, she grew up, she knew, and actually the chaos, it kind of made our family desperate for answers. And so we got invited to church, and that's where I started to learn how to cry out to God. And I did a lot of crying out to God through those years of being aware. And so we would be in church, and then we'd be out of church. And things would be going really good in our family when my dad would be sober, and my dad was running 2 businesses, and there was a lot of stress, and still learning how. And now I understand the battle between the spirit and the flesh. Now I understand there was a battle between, like, you might be born again, but if you don't understand that you have to take dominion over that flesh nature and reign through the spirit. And I think that there was some of that knowledge there, but man, we were just getting exposed to Jesus and what that meant. I know as a kid, for me, I remember back all those times where I felt alone. There was just not having my dad in the house all the time, maybe to like throw catch or whatever. And now I know that he has repented of a lot of that and wishes that he would have been there for that stuff. And I'm thankful for that now. But there was an emptiness that was there. But now looking back, I see how God was there through it all, and how I just had this feeling, this sense of like hope that God could rescue my dad, that God could rescue us. So from there, I would just say there was a lot of hiding things for my family. We would go to church without my dad if he went out and used, and that was just traumatizing to us. Like, it was traumatizing because things are going good, and you're depending on this one person to guide the ship of your household and your life, and that one person falls, and it feels like you fall. It feels like your hope falls. It feels like you're greatly affected by that. That was one of the great lessons I've had to learn in my life with God now, is no matter what happens to my dad, to my mom, to anybody, that God needs me to be right so he can use me, and that I'm his son, that he's my father, that he begot me. But we would hide things from the public. We'd hide things from other families. It was very much, we didn't want people to know this struggle. And that was a weight that we carried. It was very hard going to school and putting on a fake smile and pretending like my parents ran these businesses and things were good, because we didn't want to hurt my dad. Little did we know that accountability probably would have been the one thing that he needed, or that we needed as a family, that codependency that we had, that if he wasn't doing well, we weren't doing well. And inevitably, a lot of this led to my own rebellion. I remember being a kid, and even though I knew about God and knew about the Lord, I was very split. I didn't understand holiness. I didn't understand reverence. I remember being convicted about like certain lusts as a kid that I didn't have any control over, or like my love for secular music, worldly music, my love for like dark entertainment or whatever. Just I so deeply, I can see it now, so deeply needed to be loved and affirmed. I so deeply wanted to be accepted by my friends. I so deeply wanted to be accepted by other people. And that's where I started to actually turn to rap music. Right now, just gotta praise him, 'cause God ain't got me out the basement. I was trying to build an empire. I identified with a lot of songs from people like Eminem, or artists like Tech9, where they documented their struggles, and I could so relate to those struggles. And my dad, having done music, and that kind of mesmerized me as a kid. Music, I just kept coming back to it. And now I know that was God planting that seed in me, but the enemy was also trying to plant seeds of discord and a love for the world and attention from the world. And so I was definitely very split as a kid. When things were going good, I was listening to Toby Mac. I was listening to Christian music. If my dad fell, I fell. I was, going my own way. And that breeded some rebellion in me. And I didn't really love God like I should have, or I didn't have that depth of relationship with God that I have now, and that I'm thankful for. And I just realized like we were very split, and not understanding just the sanctification and just sanctifying yourself under the Lord, being alone with him, that kind of thing. So I had some of that, but I was very confused as a kid. So yeah, I'll talk about my parents' divorce a little bit. And that was the one thing ever since I was 4 years old to 17 that I just always felt a responsibility, like it was my job to keep them together. My mom would have talks, it was something she was considering, and now I understand those were the consequences that my dad needed. And that's a different story, and that's his story, but it was traumatizing to me because I cherished our family. I mean, family is just very important to me. I love them very much. And I love everybody that God's given me, and my family's loved me, and it was traumatizing. I mean, I don't care what anyone says, like, divorce is not how it's meant to be. It's very common in our culture, but the two become one, and they're not to be separated, and kingdom culture is family culture. So it was traumatizing to me, and that was the thing where once we lost that, that's whenever I started saying yes. Where I always said I will never use like my dad used, I'll never be that, but that's when my value system was kind of lost, and I just said, you know what, screw it, I give up. I'm gonna try different things. You know, that's when I tried weed for the first time. You know, I knew family members that smoked weed. My dad, I'd seen him smoke weed like my whole life, and so I started experimenting with drugs and alcohol, hanging out with people, and I was just mad. I was mad at God. I was mad at my dad. I was very mad. That's when I started using drugs and alcohol. And for the most part, it stayed weed and alcohol. I had a lot of fear about losing control. I did not want to use psychedelics. I had experimented with psychedelics at time, but just a lot of weed, a lot of alcohol. For me, it was a numbing agent. Like, I smoked weed so I could just not think about things. And so, that's when I kind of lost purpose. And, you know, I dropped out of college 3 times. Like, it always came back to music for me. It didn't matter what job I was working, what I was doing, music was a real passion. And thankfully, you know, I'll say, like, music was the thing that I decided I was going to show every doubter, every person who didn't accept me, didn't love me. I was going to prove to the world that I could become something. That was my way that I was going to really get people's acceptance and their love. And man, how foolish I was to think that I could be this foul-mouthed person. You know, I didn't actually love anybody. You know, it was all about my legacy. How do you serve me? Because I'm going somewhere, right? And are you coming with me or not? And it was all about me, me, me. And I didn't understand that that was just a big defense mechanism because I felt so hurt by people. And I really didn't understand what love really was and the sacrifice that love takes. And so I loved myself. I loved myself ultimately. And I'm not saying it was all bad. There was a lot of good mixed in there, but there was a lot of mixture. So anyways, we'll fast forward to the fact that I'm selling drugs, I'm doing drugs. I have no real vision for my life. My vision was, I'm gonna be this deadbeat person who doesn't care about anybody, and if you have a problem with it, oh well. And the truth was, I was faking it because I cared a lot. But that was I guess I was trying to adapt to that image. I thought that's what the world wanted to see. I thought that's what would produce success for me. And so a lot of people might not have seen that on the outside. They might say, dude, you were a good person. You know, the truth is I wasn't a good person. I was selfish, wicked, and dark inside. I started experimenting other paths. I was going after, you know, hologram theory and just into, you know, other beliefs about who God was. And I wanted God to fit my picture because God, I didn't trust him, you know, because he didn't come through for me. Well, eventually God did come through. You know, God did show up in different miracles in my life, and I knew who Jesus was, but I was so darkened in my mind and clouded in my view because I was running from him, because I didn't trust him because of all the pain. I thought that it was his fault. I thought it was God's fault that I had went through so much pain. He didn't rescue me in time. And so my attitude was, you know what? No, you didn't rescue me when I needed it. So now I'm going to do my thing. I'm going after success. I'm going after the success of the world, and I'm going to get it. And so I was running on that path, and I thought it was going to fill me. And the more that I did that, and I did start to get some success. I was starting to go somewhere because guess what? God gave me talents. And I was using those talents. I was just using them for the wrong kingdom. I was using them for Satan's kingdom. So, because I still had this, I still knew that I had experienced Jesus and that somewhere Jesus fit into this picture, and I knew, but I was just confused. I wasn't submitted to the Word. I wasn't submitted to His truth, and I was far from Him in my heart and in my mind and in my lack of understanding. With that, my health started to deteriorate. My mental health deteriorated. I went through bouts of what was borderline schizophrenia. I was hearing voices, sometimes 50, 100 voices at once. I couldn't quiet it. I had sleep paralysis. I dealt with demonic hauntings and oppressions. And I was going downhill, and I was going downhill fast. I remember whenever I was using cocaine by myself at 8 a.m. in the morning thinking, what am I doing? I'm locked in the basement, using cocaine, playing video games, no purpose. And I'm like, I know where this leads, because I saw where it led my dad, and I just saw myself becoming like my dad. And I'm like, man, I don't know about this. This is scary. I had made a secular album at this time. And in these songs, I was talking about God. There was these highlights of God, and it was a cry for help. And it's funny because God was planting seeds in me this whole time. I had miracles happening to me. The Bible says that the kingdom of God is as if a man should scatter seed on the ground, and how it grows, no one knows. And so there were seeds that were growing in me, but no one may have known it at the time. And so, God had a plan for me. And as I was finding success, I was crying out to help deep in my heart that God might rescue me. My dad had found freedom. He had found sobriety. But I was mad because I was like, well, what if you go and use again? Now, he was sober for 5 years at this point, and there was real proof in the pudding that his life had been changed, and he never tried to force himself on me. He gave me a stern warning after this one thing happens, and this was a major changing point for me. Is I remember the big turning point for me. God had so much grace on me, guys. Like, God had so much grace on me. And what happened was, and a lot of people know this, maybe some don't, I had a 90-mile-per-hour collision on the highway. This was my second one that had happened to me. And this time I was completely blacked out. I had been blacked out by noontime, using cocaine that day, and I was driving all around town. My friends said I was swerving all over the road. They said they thought they got me home. I don't remember anything from that day. I remember actually coming to, like, I had gained consciousness a little bit about 5 or 6 p.m. and I started drinking again and blacked out again that same day. Now, I'm not a big guy, and I had drank a lot of alcohol that day. So I was on my way to Canton, Ohio. I don't even know why, I couldn't tell you. And I got rear-ended by somebody on the highway doing 90. I was doing 70. The Stadies were actually waiting for me up the road because so many calls came in about me. And God had grace on me that day. Because I can tell you right now, I should be in hell. I wasn't living for God. I was living in rebellion toward God. And He had grace on me that day because I came out of that collision, my car, about half flipping off the road, going 100 feet off the side of the road. And I could have hit a guardrail, a tree, but I came out unscathed from that. And the best thing that ever happened to me was I got consequences. And those consequences made me realize that I wasn't going to be protected forever and under this covering forever. That if I chose to keep going outside of God's will for my life, if I decided to go this way to try to get famous or have success and lead other people to hell and lead other people in the wrong direction, there would be consequences. And those consequences, thankfully, weren't bodily injury or death. They were that I had to go through the court system and that I had jail hanging over my head. And the truth is, I should have gotten way more trouble than I did. God really protected me through a lot of things because He had grace and He saw my storyline and He had His hand on me that whole time. But I went through that court system, and I finally, going full circle, my dad's faith-based, my dad's recovery meeting. I was forced to start going to recovery meetings because of the courts and counseling. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me because 3 weeks into this process of having to go to recovery meetings, I remember I was hearing about Jesus again, and man, I was so far I didn't understand like the love of God, but God had grace on me. I remember Googling Jesus, actually. I was in my bedroom alone and trying to figure out if I would surrender to him. And I Googled Jesus. I had so many of my own ideas clouding my view of his truth. And I heard a lady's testimony about how she shot herself and she met Jesus face to face and he gave her a second chance. And right there, I just like, oh my goodness, how did I miss it? Like, and I broke down and I surrendered to him right there. And I surrendered to God's love. And I said, you know what, God, I give up. I give up trying to be successful in my own way. Like, I really give up. I don't want drugs. I don't want alcohol. I don't want this life I've chosen. It's never been who you've called me to be. And I surrendered to it. And that was the start of my journey into becoming a son of God and the life that I get to live today. Music was a big deal to me. But when I had surrendered to God, like, I full surrendered, because the more I was doing that music and going that way, the more hopeless I felt. I mean, there was a lot that came with this conversion. I was having demonic hauntings and like doors slamming around me in supernatural and bad ways. And then also I had a lot of problems in my health. And so I was desperate and very fearful, having panic attacks every day. And so when I was doing music for the world, when I surrendered to God, I surrendered everything. I didn't know if I'd ever do music again. However, it was very natural for me. I wouldn't say that I didn't really understand hearing the voice of God at that time, but it was very natural to start making music again. But it was going to be unapologetically for God. I just knew that. And now my music is unapologetically for the Lord Jesus Christ, and for the Father, and honoring my relationship with Him. You know, it became very natural that I was going to continue making music, but I was going to do it raw and unapologetically for Him. It wasn't all Christianized to me, right, in the beginning, because I came from making very raw music for the other side, and I wanted to make the same kind of music, but I wanted to make it unapologetically for Him. And so He so radically changed me that I just wasn't going to be ashamed. I mean, my health problems were so bad, I was concerned seriously that I could lose my life due to those. And I still struggle with some of the same health problems today, but I didn't have that foundation of a relationship with Him. So that just caused me to say, man, I don't have anything. I don't have a wife. I don't have any prospects for my life. So I was just like, you know what do I have to lose? I'm going to do this boldly for Him. And it became very natural. And I still love making raw music for Him today. And by raw, I just mean, I don't try to pretty it up or anything like that, because God hasn't told me to. God, you know, when I'm alone with Him, when I'm making that raw music for Him, I just know and feel so right with Him and really feel myself. For me, I want to make music that's just as iconic, that reaches the world in the same way, but that I wanted my secular music to reach the world, but just so ultimately for Him. And I'm totally surrendered to whatever God wants. If my music reaches the 10 people at the recovery center who needs it, or 10,000 in a stadium, man, God, I'm down for whatever you want, because it's no longer music that fills me. It's my deep and personal relationship with Him that fills me. It's my relationship with God that ultimately fills that God-shaped hole that was in me. And now music is just that salt on my life. It's my opportunity to bear fruit for His kingdom, that I might get to share in His joy with Him when I'm with Him and when I meet Him face to face. That's the real me. That's the me that He's created, and I'm excited to do it. And no matter what the outcome is, no matter what the fruit looks like, the perceived success is, I know as long as I'm following His voice that I have hand claps from heaven, and that's what I shoot for these days.